The most violent biker war ever. Hells Angels versus BULLSH T MC. What was the European war like that shook the continent? During the GREAT Nordic BIKER WAR, two powerful groups, the legendary Hells Angels and a mystery rival club, the BULLSH T MC, fight in an epic struggle. But who were the main personalities? What sparked the enmity between these bitter rivals? Join us as we uncover the secrets, alliances, and unforeseen twists that lead to this extraordinary battle and unravel the thrilling story that permanently reshaped the Scandinavian motorcycle landscape. This violent gang war, primarily between Hells Angels MC and Bandidos MC, but also involving many prospect and support clubs, broke out in 1994 and lasted until 1997 across much of Scandinavia. Copenhagen in Denmark, Helsinki in Finland, Oslo in Norway, and Helsingborg and Malmö in Sweden were the cities most affected by the conflict. On December 30th, 1980, the then United MC was designated as the first Hells Angels chapter in Scandinavia. Their long-standing opponents, the Filthy Few, were not enthusiastic about the new chapter on any level. They founded the fierce anti-Hells Angels MC crew known as BULLSH T MC, with many members from other Copenhagen MC clubs. They settled in Christiania, benefited from the cannabis trade there, and made a visit to a well-known Hells Angels pub in September 1983. This visit started a battle that would go on for the next 2 years and 4 months. The first Scandinavian MC war resulted in the deaths of 8 BULLSH members, 3 of whom were presidents, 1 Hells Angels member, and 2 innocent spectators. Members of the BULLSH T MC were also major suspects in the murder of 2 non-bikers during the war. When the authorities visited BULLSH's former clubhouse in 1986, they discovered a man's corpse beneath the clubhouse floor. Unlike the Second War, the first conflict was contained in Copenhagen alone, and the number of deaths during the Copenhagen War equaled or exceeded the number of deaths in the subsequent war. Unlike the Second War, there was a clear winner in the first, and no peace treaty was required. Morticians MC was founded in 1984, and by the early 1990s, there were numerous motorcycle clubs throughout Scandinavia. The Morticians and Hells Angels used to be friends, but in 1992, both clubs went from being groups of bikers to becoming crime organizations. The Morticians subsequently changed their name to Undertakers MC and joined forces with the Bandidos, whose only European chapter at the time was situated in Marseille, France. The Undertakers united with the Bandidos in 1993 to form Bandidos MC Denmark. The Hells Angels attempted to prevent Morbids MC from becoming a well-established biker club and possible rival in Sweden in 1994. The Morbids then formed an agreement with the Bandidos, who provided assistance to their potential club. The Outlaws MC also collaborated with the Bandidos in Norway. This eventually led to a drug trade battle between the Hells Angels and the Bandidos, Scandinavia's 2 most prominent outlaw biker gangs, which the authorities described as a deadly game to see who was the fiercest. Many Scandinavian port cities, particularly Copenhagen, were utilized to smuggle drugs in from Spain and the Netherlands. According to a 1997 New York Times report, the Bandidos had around 130 members from at least 7 chapters in the Nordic countries during the war, while the Hells Angels had around 290 members from 15 chapters, with 85 in Sweden, 110 in Denmark, 70 in Norway, and 25 in Finland. The first incident occurred on January 26, 1994, in the Morbids MC clubhouse in Helsingborg, Sweden. However, no one was harmed or killed. In February 1994, there was a shootout in the same city between Hells Angels and Bandidos members, which resulted in the death of Hells Angels member Joachim Bowman. A few days later, an anti-tank rocket was launched against the Hells Angels headquarters. The Hells Angels shot dead the president of Clan MC, an ally of the Bandidos in Finland, on June 22, 1994, and the war reached Norway on the 19th of February 1995, when a shootout in Oslo between the Hells Angels and the Bandidos resulted in 1 biker being injured. On the 17th of July 1995, the president of Bandidos MC Sweden, Michael Joe Lundgren, was slain, and the Bandidos replied by launching anti-tank rockets at Hells Angels prospects clubs in Helsinki, Finland, and Helsingborg, Sweden, 9 days later. Kai Tapio Blom, a Bandidos member, was sentenced to 6 years in prison, and Antti Tauno Tapani was sentenced to 4 years. When the president of Bandidos MC Finland appeared at a Helsinki courthouse for the Blom and Tapani trial, he was ambushed and battered by Hells Angels and Cannonball MC members. In retribution, a Hells Angels-owned tattoo parlor in Helsinki was torn down. On Christmas Day 1995, 2 Hells Angels members were beaten up by Bandidos at a Copenhagen bar, signaling the start of the war in Denmark. The Hells Angels Prospect Club, Screwdrivers MC's clubhouse in Hamar, and the Hells Angels clubhouse in Oslo were the targets of a series of bombs in Norway in January 1996. A month later, a Hells Angels-owned bar in Helsinki, Finland was also bombed. The Hells Angels assaulted the Bandidos Helsinki clubhouse on March 1, 1996, and 2 Bandidos members were shot. Jarkko Kokko, the vice president of Bandidos MC Finland, and one of the men shot, died in hospital 16 days later from his injuries. Ilkka Ukkonen, a Hells Angels prospect, was condemned to 12.5 years in prison, and Jussi Penttinen was sentenced to 6 years. On March 10, 1996, there were twin attacks on Bandidos members at airports in Denmark and Norway. At Fornebu Airport in Oslo, several Bandidos were wounded, and at Kastrup Airport in Copenhagen, Bandidos returning from a weekend in Helsinki were shot. 3 were wounded, and 1, Uffe Larsson, was killed. 6 Hells Angels members and associates were apprehended and convicted to a total of 53 years in jail, with 1 sentenced to life in prison. Another set of bombings occurred in April and May 1996, when Hells Angels clubhouses in Helsingborg, Sweden, and southern Denmark were assaulted, as well as the clubhouse of a Hells Angels prospect club, Avengers MC, in Aalborg, Denmark. On the 15th of July 1996, Jan Face Krogh Jensen, a Danish Bandidos member, was shot and killed in Drammen, Norway, and a Hells Angels supporter was slain 6 days later in Oslo. 2 Hells Angels were also shot and wounded in Malmö, Sweden, and at Giderup prison in Denmark the same month. The vice president of Hells Angels MC Sweden was shot and wounded in Helsingborg on August 28th. In October 1996, there were 3 attacks against Hells Angels clubhouses. In the third, an explosion in Malmö injured 12 innocent onlookers, and 3 days later, an anti-tank rocket was fired at a clubhouse in Copenhagen during a celebration. Louis Lynn Nielsen, a Hells Angels member, and guest Jan Krohn were both killed. Niels Poulsen, a Bandidos aspirant, was convicted of carrying out the attacks and condemned to life in jail. A vehicle bomb exploded outside the Hells Angels clubhouse in Oslo on the 30th. Bandidos members were shot in Horsens and Aalborg, Denmark near the end of 1996. In early 1997, a Hells Angels member, Kim Thursø Svendsen, was slain in Aalborg, and the president of the Outlaws, Thor Henke Holm, and a French member were shot and wounded by a Hells Angels ally, Untouchables MC. Foot troops from the Bandidos were also killed in Denmark's Amager and Kygge. In response, the Bandidos ordered shootings of Hells Angels members and allies in Frederiksberg, Copenhagen. A car bomb exploded outside a Bandidos clubhouse in Drammen, Norway, on June 4, 1997, killing Irene Astrid Bakkavold, a civilian driving by. In 2002, a Hells Angels member was convicted of the bombing. After a shootout in Lysekil, Denmark 3 days later, Bjorn Gudmundsen was killed and 3 other Bandidos were injured. Von Smith, a Hells Angels member, was convicted of the murder and sentenced to life in prison. The most recent incident occurred on April 11th, when the Bandidos clubhouse in Dalby, Denmark was bombed. The conflict concluded on September 25, 1997, when Big Jim Tindon, president of all Bandidos chapters in Europe, shook hands with Hells Angels Europe president Bent Blondie Nielsen in front of Danish television news cameras. By the end of the war, 11 people had been killed, 74 had been attempted, and 96 had been injured. Both clubs signed a pact promising that no new chapters would be established in Scandinavia, but by the end of the 1990s, both parties had already broken the agreement. In Denmark, a rule was established that prohibited motorcycle clubs from buying or renting property for club operations. The law was later overturned on constitutional grounds. That's all for the video. Like, share, and subscribe to keep up with more gripping stories of motorcycle fights and historical conflicts. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a thrilling update.